It's funny when you talk about the departure of L'Jarius Sneed, Dave Merritt in the offseason, it was when we were at Arrowhead, so it had to be OTAs and mandatory minicamp, said it's like replacing Michael Jordan. And then he kind of stepped back and said, I'm not comparing L'Jarius Sneed to Michael Jordan, but that is how difficult they think it is to replace Sneed.
What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Happy Thursday. I'm Hayley Lewis, and this is Chiefs News Daily. The Chiefs are off today, but we are not. We're bringing you an exclusive interview. This is Marleah Campbell, KCTV5's sports anchor and reporter, breaking down training camp with us. But as always, first give us a like and subscribe right here on the KCSN YouTube channel, and let's get into it. Marleah, appreciate you being on. We were just talking about it before we started recording. Training camp, it's a grind, It's a grind for the media, too. You're driving up there every single day. Yes, you don't have to stay in a dorm room, but it's hot, you're sweaty. You're hearing from players and coaches every single day.
Yeah.
It's almost like there's so much content coming your way that it's hard to decipher what storylines to go with. So I'll ask you this. What's been maybe your favorite things that have come out of training camp so far?
Yeah, I think going in, the big position battle everyone was watching was left tackle. Kingsley Suamataia has had a really, really good camp to the point of where I think the position is his for the taking. I mean, he has to perform well in these next 3 preseason games, going against someone other than someone wearing a Chiefs uniform for the first time at this level. But he has done extremely well. So I think that job is essentially locked down for him. Wanya Morris kind of taking the swing spot behind him. But he's played extremely, extremely well. The second thing is the kind of sweetheart, the darling of camp I saw last year that I was kind of hoping would make the roster, didn't end up making it. Deneric Prince has gotten a lot of second team reps at running back in the mix with Isaiah Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So it wouldn't surprise me if we saw him on the roster as well out of Tulsa.
Now, there's another thing we talk about every single day, and it seems like, and this happens when you practice so much, there's a new injury or there's a new person returning from injury, they're sidelined, they're out, people are or coaches and the training staff are really cautious during this time because nothing matters technically too much. You don't have to ramp up for a game quickly during the week. If you're dealing with an injury, you can take longer time maybe to nurse that injury. So you're there, you're listening to head coach Andy Reid. Yes, I regurgitate what he says, but you hear his inflection, you hear his tone. How serious are some of these injuries? We've seen Kadarius Toney in and out of practice. Nick Bolton is one that kind of, strikes interest. Is there any injury that's been lingering where you're like, okay, that's reason for concern so early before we get ready for the regular season?
So that's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked it. One, the two guys that I think ring many alarm bells for folks is Chris Jones has been sitting out on and off. If you've listened to Chris Jones prior to camp, he's been trying to get days off before this thing even started. So he is dealing with a shoulder stinger. But Andy Reid kind of skimmed by and said, yeah, this week is fine. Same with Nick Bolton. When we saw him go down with a left elbow injury, he had his last season, he had his left elbow, left wrist, and left ankle. His entire left side. So that raised serious alarm bells. They have sat him since then. I believe it was last Wednesday. But for exactly what you're saying, I think, again, it was described as a tweak, but at this point, why risk it? Why push it at this point in the year, especially with what Bolton had to deal with last season in terms of injury? The alarm bell one that I actually think fans should be concerned about is Kadarius Toney.
Really?
Because this was a really, really big camp for him. Okay. And just in terms of proving that he can get on the same page as Patrick Mahomes, on the mental side of it, he can get his routes down, and then he can perform and, make catches. He spent 19 of last season, he spent 19 of 21 weeks on the injured list. This season, he's already been out for a couple days with an ankle injury. And then he was out of practice on, what day is it? So on Wednesday, excuse me. And before practice, I was like, well, maybe he just re-aggravated that ankle because he had practiced a couple days before that. Turns out his back stiffened up. And I think that's a little more cause for alarm that it was something else, that he's already dealing with all these different issues. Because that wide receiver battle is tough. I mean, I think there's 4 guys on lock in that room. There are 9 potential guys that can make the roster. You're keeping 6 or 7. So we're going to have some surprising names cut. And you talk about Andy Reid's inflection. He was not happy when Kadarius went down to that ankle. He said, all right, missing camp isn't good. You got to be here for camp, so he's got to get that right and come back. There wasn't really it felt like a little bit more like stressful. Like, we got to get
sure. Just a little more urgent.
Those are the big three. Urgency is a good word. Yeah, those are the big three. I think Kadarius is the one to watch, especially in these preseason games.
We're not going to see much of the starters, and as you already know, Andy Reid says 1 quarter, we'll get 2 minutes. But what do you expect out of the offense, having seen it already on the field for the little bit of time that you guys get to during camp?
Yeah, I think fans and the media are excited, and rightfully so, about bringing that deep threat back. That, if you look at the numbers since we traded away Tyreek Hill, has been exponentially declined. You take that with a grain of salt because it is training camp. I mean, you can throw bombs. What's the risk? Especially trying to get just in sync with Hollywood and Xavier Worthy. But I think those two guys bring a deep threat to the table that the Chiefs haven't had in recent years. I think MVS was kind of brought in for that reason, and that didn't exactly pan out. I'm like having this like flashback through my head of all the drops over the course of last season.
Right.
These are two guys that have been delivering early on. I'm excited to see. Hollywood Brown is an established vet. I mean, he's kind of a guy you have to keep in mind, staying healthy and limiting his reps. I don't think we'll see him a ton on Saturday. But when it comes to Xavier Worthy, I'm excited to see when the lights come on, because as a rookie, there is a lot of pressure, and he's in a situation where he's right now maybe your number 3 receiver, with the knowledge that he could become the number 2 if the Rashee Rice situation develops quickly. So yeah, I think that deep threat, we're trying to like temper our excitement at camp because this is the time to let it fly. But I do think that component of the offense will return in a pretty significant fashion this year.
Last question I'll ask you is on the other side of the ball. The defense returned a lot of their starters, but they're also down L'Jarius Sneed, which is just a huge, position to not only fill, but his leadership role that he kept as well. Trent McDuffie obviously is going to be a guy who can fill that void, but who is going to fill Trent McDuffie's shoes as well. So there's a lot of moving pieces in that secondary, and there's a lot of banged up players in the secondary right now.
Yeah.
What is the depth like in the backfield, and how do you see things continuing this season? Do you see any other particular cornerback maybe potentially stepping up as well?
Yeah, it's funny when you talk about the departure of L'Jarius Sneed. Dave Merritt in the offseason, it was when we were at Arrowhead, so I had to be OTAs and mandatory minicamp, said it's like replacing Michael Jordan. And then he kind of stepped back and said, I'm not comparing L'Jarius Sneed to Michael Jordan, but that is how difficult they think it is to replace Sneed. I mean, and Steve Spagnuolo says this is not going to be a 1-to-1 replacement. Like, right now, he will fill in, and we have our new L'Jarius Sneed. You can't do that with the caliber of talent and leadership and just playmaking skills that Sneed had. I mean, think back to the Ravens game last season. So I think it's going to be done by committee, but this is another position group I'd keep a close eye on in these preseason games. Steve Spagnuolo said earlier this week, we know who our number 1 is. We don't know who's stepping up after that. No one has really separated themselves. And he's waiting for someone to say, I'm that guy. And I think this was actually not his last presser, but the one before, so it would have been last week. At that point, no one has stepped up yet. Joshua Williams has had a really good camp. We haven't seen much of Nazeeh Johnson. He's kind of been on and off with injury. So, there's a number of guys that have the opportunities to step up right now because that position is open for the taking.
All right, you mentioned it, preseason game 1 coming up on Saturday. A lot of those players have that opportunity to show coaches what they're made of and also get to, play against someone else who is not on their own team. It'll be exciting.
They're ready for that, yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I'm sure.
We are too.
Yes, as well, the media is excited to get this thing rolling. Marleah, appreciate you. I'm sure we'll be chatting through the regular season as well. Love all that you're doing. Keep it up and wear the sunscreen and enjoy camp.
Yeah, thanks, Hayley.
Alrighty, folks, that wraps up another episode of Chiefs News Daily. Again, join us tomorrow at 7 p.m. and have a great rest of your Thursday night.